Is this the happiness we chase, this shimmering surface that cracks under the slightest pressure? A phantom limb, perhaps, this relentless ache for a joy defined by its own frantic pursuit. We arrive breathless at its supposed doorstep, only to find the door was always open. Or maybe never there at all. Never. What if the insistence on light is what blinds us? What if the true symphony plays in the silences we've been taught to fear? This chase, this desperate choreography of smiles, does it not obscure a deeper, more unsettling current? A current where the real treasure might lie, not in the glittering peak, but in the unseen valley where the roots of all things intertwine, in darkness and in difficult soil. And so, the performance continues. A face meticulously arranged to display contentment, while beneath it, the unacknowledged self whispers its dissonant truths. Is it not a profound loneliness, this curated joy, presented to an audience equally engaged in its own facade? We are told to banish the shadows, to seek only the sunlit uplands. But what if the shadows carry half our story, half our depth? This relentless pursuit of an uninterrupted high note, does it not deafen us to the music of our own complex being, the sorrow that carves space for joy, the fear that sharpens courage? Perhaps the dark reality is not an enemy, but an invitation to cease the exhausting battle for a flawless surface and to meet ourselves, finally, in the resonant fullness of all that we are. This constant striving, this desperate climb towards a perpetually receding summit of happiness. What if it's the mountain itself that is the illusion? We are sold a destination, a fixed point of arrival, yet life relentlessly flows, a river indifferent to our maps of joy. The moments we grasp and try to hold, branding them happy, become brittle, ghosts of what was. Could it be that the darkness we fear is simply the river's depth, the unseen currents that shape its course? To dread this depth is to dread the very nature of the flow. And if happiness is not a place to reach but the willingness to be carried, even into unknown waters, then what of our frantic paddling against the stream? We are taught to build fortresses against the night, to wallpaper our minds with affirmations of perpetual sunshine. But the night always comes, doesn't it? It seeps through the cracks of our most resilient defenses, not as an invader, but as a forgotten resident of our own inner landscape. This dark reality, is it truly dark? Or is it merely unlit by the narrow beam of our expectations? We yearn for a happiness that is a constant state, a summit attained and held, yet the very nature of existence is flux, a dance of arising and passing away. To resist this dance is to resist life itself, to attempt to hold a wave still in the palm of your hand. Consider the silence that follows a storm. It is not an empty silence, but one pregnant with the echoes of power, with the scent of cleansed earth, with a stillness that allows the subtle sounds of new beginnings to be heard. What if our sorrows, our anxieties, our supposed failures are but the storms that carve the landscape of our soul, making way for a different kind of growth, one that happens in the rich, dark soil of acceptance, not in the arid plains of denial? The relentless pursuit of a prescribed happiness often becomes a frantic distraction, a way to avoid the profound encounter with our own depths. We fear the void, the seeming emptiness, because we have been conditioned to believe that fullness only comes from accumulation, of joys, of achievements, of possessions. But what if this feared emptiness is not a lack, but a spaciousness? A clearing in the dense forest of our becoming, where we can finally see the sky, not just the canopy. Alan Watts spoke of the wisdom of insecurity, the understanding that the only constant is change, and that true peace comes not from clinging, but from letting go. Letting go of the ideal of a perfect, uninterrupted happiness. Letting go of the shame attached to our pain. Letting go of the belief that we are somehow broken if we are not perpetually smiling. This dark reality then transforms. It ceases to be a threat and becomes instead a quiet, unassuming teacher, guiding us towards a more authentic, more integrated way of being, where joy and sorrow are not warring factions, but intimate partners in the unfolding mystery of a life fully lived. It whispers that the treasure was never in the light alone, but in the courage to embrace the whole spectrum of our human experience. How deeply have we internalized the decree that joy must be loud and sorrow silent, shameful? This internal censor, forever editing our experience down to acceptable, happy sound bites. Whose voice is it, truly? It whispers of failure at the first sign of unease, urges us to quickly patch the cracks, to present an unbroken facade. But what if the cracks are where the light and the darkness and the truth of us actually enter and mingle? This relentless editing, this fear of our own uncurated emotional landscape, is it not a profound act of self-alienation? We become performers in our own lives, seeking applause for a role that consumes us, leaving little room for the authentic self that might only wish to breathe, to feel, to be, in all its unpredictable weather. Perhaps the darkest reality is not the pain itself, but the consuming effort we expend trying to convince ourselves and others that it isn't there, thus missing the chance to learn what it has come to teach. Observe the subtle recoil, the almost imperceptible flinch when the conversation veers towards the uncomfortable, the unresolved, a shared, unspoken agreement to skirt the edges of the abyss, to keep the surface placid. But what energies gather in those avoided depths? What potent truths are we exiling from our collective and individual awareness by this mutual pact of superficiality? We speak of finding happiness as if it were a lost object, a destination to be reached after a strenuous journey. Could it be less about finding and more about ceasing to run from the full spectrum of what it means to be alive? This darkness, so often maligned, is it not also the fertile ground from which resilience springs? The quiet space where introspection can finally breathe, the contrast that gives sweetness its sharp relief. To deny its existence, or to perpetually battle it, is perhaps to refuse half of the intricate, messy, beautiful gift of consciousness. We are sold images of bliss, serene smiles against sun-drenched landscapes, a perpetual golden hour of the soul, and we chase these snapshots, these curated moments, believing they are the currency of a life well lived. But what of the textures of the mundane, the gray sky that mirrors an inner listlessness, the rough edges of unresolved grief? Are these not also part of the legitimate territory of being? This insistence on a singular narrative of happiness forces a kind of inner exile for all other states. We become cartographers of a false world, mapping only the sunlit peaks while denying the existence of the vast, shadowy valleys that give the peaks their definition, their very height. Could true contentment lie not in achieving a permanent residence on those peaks, but in the courage to explore the entire map of our human heart, with all its wild, untamed, and sometimes sorrowful terrain? Consider the weight of unexpressed sorrows, the energy bound up in anxieties we dare not name. They accumulate, like silt in a riverbed, not truly gone, but shaping the flow, creating unseen eddies and currents beneath the surface we try to keep smooth. This pursuit of an unblemished, happy state, does it not inadvertently demand a kind of psychic amputation? We sever the parts of ourselves deemed negative, hoping to float lighter, yet find ourselves strangely adrift, incomplete. What if the true path to a resilient peace is not through avoidance, but through a courageous embrace of this inner silt? Not to dredge it all up in a frenzy, but to acknowledge its presence, to understand that the river of the self is always richer, deeper, and more alive for the complexities it carries within its course. Could this dark reality be, in essence, the unacknowledged richness of our full emotional lives, waiting not for eradication, but for compassionate recognition? This relentless effort to be happy, does it not become a subtle form of suffering in itself, a constant vigilance against the intrusion of any unwanted emotion, a tiring self-manipulation to maintain a state that, by its very nature, is as fluid and changeable as the weather? Imagine the quiet release in simply allowing the weather of the soul to be what it is, without judgment, without the frantic need to alter every cloud or banish every shadow. What if the darkness is not an invading force, but simply the absence of our struggle against it? A space where we might discover that beneath the turbulence of our manufactured highs and resisted lows, there resides a profound, unwavering stillness. Could it be that this elusive peace we seek under the banner of happiness is found not in the conquering of our inner landscape, but in the radical act of ceasing hostilities against its native state? We are told to seek the light, yet it is in the deepest darkness that stars become visible. We are urged to find joy, but often it is through the lens of sorrow that compassion gains its clearest focus. This relentless division of experience into good and bad, happy and sad, does it not create an endless internal war, a landscape where peace is impossible because we are always fighting half of ourselves? What if this dark reality is not the antagonist in our story, but the very ground that makes the story possible, the silence that gives music its meaning, the unknown against which all discovery is set? Perhaps the true liberation is not in eradicating the shadows, but in realizing that the light we seek is the very same awareness that perceives both light and shadow, impartially, without demanding that one vanquish the other. Could it be that simple, that profound? We are conditioned to believe that life is a problem to be solved, and unhappiness the primary symptom of its unsolved state. So we strive, we analyze, we medicate, we seek gurus and quick fixes, all in pursuit of a final, triumphant arrival at the shores of perpetual contentment. But what if life isn't a problem, and happiness isn't a destination? What if the journey itself, with all its unexpected detours through shadowlands and across barren plains, is the point? This dark reality, then, isn't a sign of being lost, but an integral part of the terrain, a landscape that shapes us, teaches us, and ultimately makes the brief, sunlit clearings all the more precious. Could our relentless focus on a future, flawless joy be the very thing that prevents us from inhabiting the flawed, profound, and vibrant present? Notice the frantic urge to fill every silence, to soothe every flicker of unease with some distraction, a screen, a substance, another fleeting pleasure. What is it we are so afraid to meet in those unadorned moments, in the raw, unfiltered presence of ourselves? This constant motion, this elaborate dance of avoidance, does it truly bring the peace we crave, or does it merely postpone an inevitable encounter with the disquiet that fuels it? The dark reality might not be the disquiet itself, but our terrified resistance to it, our belief that it signals something fundamentally wrong. What if instead it is a quiet invitation to pause, to listen deeply, to discover that the only way out of the maze of our anxieties is to stand still and let its walls dissolve? Why this desperate insistence on a life scrubbed clean of all discomfort, all ambiguity? Is it truly strength we build by constructing such elaborate defenses against the natural ebb and flow of human feeling, or is it a more fragile edifice, perpetually threatened by the very life it seeks to control? We chase an ideal of happiness that is often a caricature, a brightly painted mask that hides the rich, complex, sometimes aching face of our authentic humanity. What if the dark reality is simply reality itself, in its unvarnished, unfiltered, and often paradoxical glory? And what if our task is not to escape it, to fix it, or to transcend it, but to learn to meet it with an undefended heart, to find the unexpected beauty in its shadows, the resilience in its challenges, and the profound liberation in ceasing to demand that it be anything other than what it is? Perhaps this dark reality is not a place of suffering, but a landscape of profound, unacknowledged beauty, like the intricate root system hidden beneath a magnificent tree. We admire the sunlit leaves and blossoms, yearning for their perpetual display, yet forget the silent, unseen labor in the earth that makes such flourishing possible. This constant turning away from the hidden, the uncomfortable, the unresolved, does it not also mean we turn away from the sources of our own strength, our deepest nourishment? The shadow is not the absence of light, but its companion, the two forever dancing, defining each other. To seek only one is to live in a world perpetually incomplete, a song with missing notes. What if embracing the full spectrum, the shadowed depths alongside the sunlit peaks, is not a defeat, but the truest way to finally come home to ourselves? And so, the seeking slows. The frantic chase for an imagined, flawless joy gives way to a quieter observation, a more spacious way of being with what is. This dark reality, once feared as a specter, now reveals itself as merely the unlit corners of a vast, shared room, a room where all of life, in its bewildering and beautiful complexity, unfolds. There is no final arrival, no permanent state of fixed happiness to attain, only the continuous imperfect dance of light and shadow. Perhaps the deepest truth lies not in answers, but in the courage to inhabit the questions themselves, to rest in the mystery, and to find a strange, resilient peace in knowing that the full, unedited experience of being human is, in itself, enough.